regulatory excellence, how GCCs support in navigating financial risk, compliance, cyber, and reporting. That's what the next discussion will be all about. In fact, in this session, we will be exploring how GCCs in India can enhance regulatory excellence and navigate through the challenges and complexities, be it financial risk, management, compliance, cybersecurity, as well as reporting. Now, the panelists over here who will be joining us in a moment will share their insights on how they use technology, global practices, and innovative strategies that GCCs employ to mitigate risks, uphold compliance, and safeguard against cyber threats and streamline reporting processes, thereby driving sustainable business growth. All right, so with that, let me go ahead and invite all our speakers onto the stage. Joining us first, we have Hariharan, who is the Global I2P Operations Lead from SYNGENTA. Yes, could we have a round of applause as our speakers join us on stage, ladies and gentlemen? Joining him, we do have the Regional Leader for Cummins Business Services, Mr. Jatin Bhatia. Coming up next, we do have the Director of Global Business Services and Chief Transformation Officer for APAC for Boston Scientific, Mr. Sudhir Dasamantharao. And to moderate the discussion, we have with us Rahul Bhagoji, who is a partner at Deloitte, India. All right, Mr. Rahul, over to you.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Has been an exciting day. I think we started with the whole GCC growth journey. We had some new names. I've just noted them down. I think we coined GCC as something that is exponential value creation zone. It's a very innovative term. And with all of these opportunities going on, I think we are out here to focus on something very critical. I think there was a very good analogy in the morning that one of our esteemed panelists had brought out, where when work started for the GCCs back maybe 15, 20 years back, I think it was equivalent to like the fingers of the hand. Then slowly and steadily, I think, a lot of end-to-end work started happening, and it was more kind of equating to the limbs, and then moved on to become the spine of the body, and now even the brain. Now, you can imagine, as we are expanding with all of these things, I think what is also happening is the complexities of risk and compliance come along with it. So I think today's panel is really going to focus on this whole, the main topic of how does the landscape of risk and compliance operate in the GCC setup, and also how are these GCCs really helping their global organizations from a regulatory excellence standpoint. So without much ado, I'll welcome our panelists. I'll just request our panelists to just give a brief 1-minute introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul. So I'm Sudhir Dasamantharao. I represent Boston Scientific. It's a medtech company. It's a medical device company. We have GCC centers in Gurgaon and Pune, and I also have a center in Dalian in China. So that's where I come from.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Rahul, and thank you for having me. I'm Jatin, and I'm representing Cummins. Usually we get our company's name a little skewed. It's Cummins. Cummins essentially is an industrial company. It's a US-based corporation specializing in diesel engine and now alternate fuel and alternate energy technologies. And I essentially lead our GCC shared service space in India. We are structured slightly different. So we have a big R&D center, which is a different vertical, and then we have all the other business processes kind of housed into a GCC kind of a framework. So that's essentially a little bit about me.
Thanks, Jatin. My name is Hariharan. I represent SYNGENTA. SYNGENTA is a Swiss-based agrochemical company. We have a GCC set up in India in Pune for the last 10 years. We've grown from almost 10, 15 roles when we started in early 2014 to almost 1,000 plus roles now. And looking forward to an interesting discussion as we go ahead.
Well, thanks. Thanks, Hariharan. I think we'll move on to some of the questions for the panelists. I think all of you come from a variety of backgrounds with extensive experience in the risk and the compliance frameworks. And, I think one unique thing of this panel is they come from different industries. So one key question to maybe all of you is, what are some of the key challenges that you face in running a global mandate from India for the respective industries that you operate in? Maybe Sudhir, if you want to start.
Yeah. I think when you talk about risk and compliance, people never pay much attention unless something happens. I always call kind of and give this analogy for risk and compliance. It's like risk and compliance is like a brakes for a car. You can go as fast as you can. Without brakes, you can't. And risk and compliance challenges are like starts with the awareness, right? It's a lot of GCCs as we grow. So much, and then so much talent we hire. People have to understand being a medtech company, highly regulated, very little room of making mistakes. So I think the awareness about the experience, the patient care, the external regulators keeping a close watch on how we manage our operations becomes really, really challenging. And when we have hiring people from across different functions and different organizations, the first and important element is the explaining the impact of having a mistake, and how that impacts the brand and not only just the financial elements. So these are the things which are very challenging, and it also starts with the core about how we are driving the culture in terms of the risk understanding and the compliance understanding and these elements.
Thanks a lot.
If I may just add a little bit to what Sudhir is saying and just broaden this idea of risk and compliance, because the moment we say risk and compliance, we talk about financial reporting and those kind of stuff. But if you look at medical sciences or an industrial company where the product goes on for a variety of application which has dual use and so on and so forth, the amount of regulatory barriers or regulatory compliances that you have to do is phenomenal. And broadly you can put it in three silos. One is product and product performance related. That's one big vertical. Then you have commercial risk, wherein you talk about your customers, suppliers, and those kind of stuff. And then of course the financial and the regulatory kind of pieces of it. And in each of these areas, because most of the companies that we kind of come from or work operate in multiple legal jurisdictions, and just comprehending and having a catalog of what is to be done across each of this vertical in itself is a
I can imagine.
Slightly a different paradigm here. When we set up GCC, say about 10 years ago, and we had a small compliance team doing it for a region, today we do it for the globe. The expectation from the team is to keep, sharing the best practices across regions. So what is happening good in, say, a country like Japan, can it be replicated for Brazil? Can that country do it differently? And I think this is what we get to the space, because a team sitting here has a view of what's happening in each of the different territories, different geographies, again, under various verticals that we have. The other piece is, I can't emphasize more that over the last couple of years, the use of data. There is so much of data available in our systems. How can the compliance team use that data to add more value, add to business, give to business those risks that they are sitting with today? Data is knowledge. So we're actually working on certain systems like Celonis, wherein we can dwell down more on this data to add more value to business as we go ahead. And I can see the whole compliance space in GCC further evolving as we move ahead.
Thanks a lot, Hariharan, for these insights. Effectively, I think it's a constantly evolving game, and I think we just started with something simple, and now there's just demand for more and more. I guess that is the end thing. I think a question for Jatin. given the global R&D hub that you run, Jatin, from in India, that I'm sure there must be a series of regulatory compliances, not just from a financial compliance standpoint, but multiple other regulatory compliances. And how do you think that these compliances shape up the work that you do here, or the kind of work that you could do here? That is, I think, one part of the question. And maybe the second part of the question is, with the kind of work that's happening here in India, how does it help Cummins globally to achieve regulatory excellence?
As I said, ours is an industrial company making products which has dual use. A large chunk of our product application is on highway in developed markets of North America, Europe, and so on and so forth. So there are regulatory dimensions from end use. So emission is a big kind of area of compliance for us. So that's one big silo in itself. I mean, you can have an army of people doing that, and then what goes in our product is another area of compliance when you talk about R&D. And then the third big vertical is the intellectual property. The intellectual property that we generate and how we protect it. But more importantly, how do we make sure that we don't transgress on intellectual property of some other kind of player in the market. So these are broad three verticals, and the way it has evolved for us is the compliance in this facet is embedded in the engineering center. So we have a group which is called a PCRA, which is essentially a product compliance from an emission regulation perspective. So in terms of when you design your product and as the products are getting used, now you have to ensure that the products comply over the life of their use. For example, I don't know if you're aware, in India, for example, we went from BS4 to BS6 and then BS6 to BS6 OBD2, which essentially means over a period of 7 years, when your product is, the trucks are plying on the road, they need to ensure that the emission that comes out of the vehicle is as per the regulatory kind of framework, and that applies to North America and so on and so forth, which means a lot of data is captured, a lot of data is analyzed real time to make sure that the products are. Now, are we there in terms of the value chain, doing everything? Not yet. It's a gradual process, but there are teams which are embedded within the global R&D who kind of work in this space. So that's one use case of where regulatory compliance, the India teams are kind of contributing heavily. The other is like lead free. Lead is a big thing, and there are a lot of compliances around that. So when parts are kind of designed and the specs are kind of brought in, there's a review, and this review needs to happen constantly. And we're talking, typically companies like ours, have parts running into millions. So how do you make sure that every part, every supplier, and every country, we understand and do that. So there are teams that are dedicated and support that side of. So that's like another use case of it. On the IP side, it's more of legal and the technical folks. So one is IP generation, and then how do you make sure that you take it through a review process and file for the right kind of protection. But also, while products are getting developed, co-developed with teams in India working seamlessly with other region, is to make sure that we don't infringe on design or intellectual properties that some of the competitors have. So that's the third kind of use case that our engineers along with our legal teams kind of constantly work on. But just to sum it up, it has been an organic evolution in the sense that as we build our tech center in India, and as engineers started kind of getting integrated in the global kind of product development teams, these groups started kind of coming up. I hope and I believe as we go ahead, this whole availability of data, or access to database across the globe enables us to provide more and more value-added service. In terms of scanning through what kind of intellectual property restrictions you have around the use of designs, or what kind of compliances you need to have when you talk about product in use across geographies. We're hoping and trying to say that how do we build more on that. So that's how I'd put it in a nutshell from an R&D engineering space.
Well, thanks a lot, Jatin. This is really insightful. I think the kind of work that is happening is really very unique and at a very different level. So thanks a lot for sharing this with us. A question for Sudhir. I think, since, with your transformation hat on, right, I think, I'm sure you're involved in a lot of large transformations, right? So when you are looking at a large transformation, how do you approach, the entire risk and the regulatory aspects, especially when these transformations are getting executed from the GCC centers? And how do we engage that there's enough governance and end-to-end accountability?
Yeah, with regard to transformation, I think from Boston Scientific out of GCC, we are actually driving a lot of large S4 HANA implementation, right? When you're implementing such scale of transformation, it's important the business continuity, right? It is not just a system implementation. How do you ensure that the manufacturing lines are still on, it's not disrupted, the whole supply chain network is still on? What if that fails? What is the backup plan we need to have? So these are some of the things. And as an organization, we continue to acquire a lot of companies year on year. And one thing unique about the Boston Scientific GCC is that we also have a centralized team of acquisitions and integration, because that's also deal with a bit of the change management transformation, integrating systems, integrating people into BSC, and how do you look at the risk elements and the compliance elements associated with. So as a transformation, we do a lot of aspects of not only just these large transformations like S4 HANA, but also looking at these integrations and acquisitions, and also setting up the whole compliance and risk COE out of GCC. And that adds a lot of value. Who understands the business also understands what happens from behind those transactions. And one of the things what we are elevated ourselves is using the analytics and driving those compliance reports, right? Because everything is in the system. How do you really analyze and provide the insights to the business, seeing that these are the gaps we are seeing and how these can be addressed. So these are some of the examples, what we are trying to drive as part of this whole transformation in the risk and compliance.
Thanks a lot, Sudhir. Thanks for those really good insights. One question for Hariharan. I think, in the area of the GCCs, right? Can you give us examples of how are you seeing like technology being used for innovative strategies to ensure better compliance and also to ensure regulatory excellence in the areas of your business?
Yeah, actually, technology, say 3 years ago, was hardly playing a role, and especially in the risk and compliance space. But today, I guess we need to innovate more, we need to do more. And I just want to pick up on one point that Sudhir mentioned about risk COE, and we've started something a year ago wherein we've identified a set of 3 team members within the compliance team who are business partners. So what do? They actually go territory by territory, segment by segment, talk to the business leaders, talk to the finance teams in the countries to understand what is the risks that they are dealing with, trying to understand that better to see how can compliance as a team add value to that. Is there any process challenges that the country is facing? I think, if you see, one is the typical compliance, and which is actually going and being part of checking that the SOX compliant, we are SOX compliant, the regulatory reporting happens on time. And I think that's a piece which is given. Now, I think we're reaching a stage in India that if this work is being done by a GCC, it is expected that team would anyway be doing it, and that's the reason we exist. I think what can we do more? From a technology standpoint, SYNGENTA now has embarked on a journey on Celonis. We're looking at various application within Celonis to see which can mold data in a manner which can help us identify risk, identify areas where there are loopholes, so that the compliance team can give these insights to the countries, can work on processes which can be fixing those loopholes as well. As I said earlier in my first introduction as well, there is a lot of data. It is how we utilize that data to our benefit. Celonis certainly is a tool which can cut across systems within the ERP to give us on one particular platform all the data that we need. And I think that's a journey which we've just started in SYNGENTA, and I'm seeing already a lot of benefits around that.
Thanks a lot, Hariharan. I think one theme clear is coming out is, almost in every area, there's clear focus from a risk and compliance standpoint, and I think people are even moving to the next level of kind of forming the whole risk and compliance COE concept of it. Now, I think, given time, I think we may have time for just maybe one last question. I think the kind of data that all of your CEO, all of the amount of data that would be handled in the GCC is just massive. I think with that kind of a data, I think, are there kind of any examples of, what are the best practices that you're driving from, the whole regulatory reporting, be it compliance, be it kind of risk management striving, where data is playing a big role, or the kind of access of data that we have is really helping us change certain things or creating a wow factor?
On data, now, because in GCCs everything is centralized, the team looking at data can look at across geographies. At a country level, at a CFO level, that team would not have the kind of time and nor the visibility to go through data in that much of detail. So I guess data will play a big role as we move ahead in all spheres within the GCC, but certainly in compliance and risk space also.
For us, in the engineering space, the teams here have access to pretty much everything, in terms of product spec, product designs, product drawings, and so on and so forth. In fact, the whole design and drafting for our organization is more or less centralized out of India. And it's a very rudimentary kind of piece of building block of engineering, but if not handled properly, it can kind of lead to colossal damages. So the moment you talk about data, this whole cybersecurity and the data security infrastructure comes into play. So everything from in terms of where do we host our information assets, how those are kind of ring fenced from a technology perspective, end user access in terms of how the accesses are layered so that users don't get unrestricted access to its need to know basis, so on and so forth. And then also how is data exchange between data owner, which is Cummins in this case, and the partners, the suppliers or the customers, because there is a huge amount of data that gets exchanged. So how do you have layered protection? So every facet of it, we invest. In fact, I'll just take a step back, and if you take this whole area of risk and compliance, unfortunately, like it or not, it doesn't show up as one line item in the P&L.
True.
And the day you start putting your hands around it and look at all facets of it, one would realize that the cost of compliance is really huge. And that would be an aha moment for all the GCs to say that, how do we really start bringing that cost down?
Just on one last comment on that, I think that's where we are using data more proactive than reactive. So most of the compliance and risk is more when the incident happens, you catch, but can we look at more proactive, catching them and addressing them? So that's where I think we are using the data more diligently.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this really insightful, details, and really thank you for bringing in perspectives across different industries. Well, I think we are up on time, so thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Rahul.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen.